David Jacques is going to speak to us next. He's a long-term ISCCL expert member from the United Kingdom. He's a historian and author. And he's going to talk about teaching landscape history.
And landscape is deliberate. It's not just garden history, it's landscape history. And when we talk about history, I always feel that the best form of history is the history of ideas. And you can see design as turning ideas into form. And that is why garden history, or the history of gardens as made by the Italians, the French, the English, and so forth, has been useful to students for many years, because in each century there are different ideas and people react to the ideas differently, and so you have a progression of styles that develop. But it all gets down to the ideas that people are working with. And if you're a teacher, our duty to students is to help them understand ideas and the various points of view. And these days there will be many points of view. It's important not to select ideas and points of view, but to give the student a rounded understanding of the debate that's happening at any time. And I say that because if students are encouraged to take one side or the other, they cease to be professional, they become activists. There's a difference between activism and professional action. And if you're going to be a professional landscape person, you need to understand all points of view, not just one. There have been many changes quite recently, partly because the subject seems to have changed. With the advent of cultural landscapes, the types of landscape that we're looking at has expanded enormously. So we need to look at the context of design decisions, but also the consequences of design decisions. And you can see this is true with environmental ideas, social ideas, and political ideas, and probably other sorts of ideas as well. On the environmental front, of course, the major one is climate change. But there are many other aspects to new ideas on environmental responsibility. If you change a landscape, it will have social consequences. Some people may be advantaged by it, some people may be disadvantaged by it. And it's important to understand how that takes place. And then there's political context. So it might be just a matter of city politics, which are always incredibly petty, it seems, but it's important to be aware of them. Or there could be political issues that go much further back, like, for example, colonialism and slavery, which are subjects that are being studied intensively at the moment. So, oh yes, and the students themselves are changing. I mean, look at the composition of this group. Men are definitely the oppressed minority. Just three of us amongst a huge gang of women. Well, that didn't used to be the case. I mean, the teachers of landscape history used to be mainly men. So that's changed. But also many different cultures. So there was some interesting testimony from teachers in America who found that they were not just teaching middle-class white people, but there were all sorts of different cultures that they were teaching, all coming with their different preconceptions, all wanting something different from the course. And of course, now there are new generational ideas. So millennials, I can spot one millennial here, but there's Gen Z and so forth. So each, sorry, three. Okay, right. But people in the audience are busy identifying themselves as millennials. So each generation picks up on different ideas, partly to do with the rapid progress of technology and the use of the internet and so forth. But also the background ideas, the assumptions of how society works. So, we have, in summary, we have a much more complex world these days. It's not just design history that we need to teach, although that's important still. But there's a huge background. There's a almost infinite number of points of view that come to designing these days. So, myself and a colleague at the University of Sheffield held a conference back two years ago. And the idea being really to explore some of these ideas, which hadn't been discussed enough, really. I mean, I've been teaching design history for over 40 years. You know, the English landscape garden, and the Renaissance garden, and so forth. But I'm also very involved in the cultural landscapes movement. And it's not enough for me just to keep teaching design history. People like me are yearning to teach history in a much broader sense. Very interesting conference. We put out a call for papers and got people from most parts of the world, and with an incredible diversity of views. It was astonishing. There were some people who were violently one way and others violently the other way. So we decided to turn the conference into a book, which is this one here, Teaching Landscape History, mostly authored by myself, but using the materials from the conference. So there was the papers given at the conference, 8 of them, but also there was a large number of people who wanted to comment in other ways. So we had people writing in, we had people doing their proposals for papers, and those often included some quite useful information. It didn't maybe fit into the 2-day conference, but there were some valid points of view coming. We wanted to include it all, so that we were not trying to pretend there's only one way of teaching landscape history. So now, what came out? Now, I'll just say something about the book. If you're interested in the book, I've got both it was Routledge who were the publishers. So here is how to order the book through a university library. We're not too concerned with that. I have the book as a Word file on that, so you're welcome to take copies of that. I know that's cheating, but don't tell Routledge. So what did we find? Well, first of all, there was the pure fact finding, which is finding out what the range of opinions was across the world. And as I said, there were many different contributors. We had an enormous amount of material to work with. Secondly, we composed a draft manifesto, which was really some of the principles behind teaching landscape history. And we felt we ought to start by putting down some ideas. I'll just read out a few. there's 20 points to this manifesto. Number 11 is history should explain the background to landscape ethics, encouraging students to adopt principled approaches and worldviews. 12, history should illuminate the past and present relevance of the biggest global questions, such as climate change, biodiversity, sustainability, and social justice to landscape practice. History should assist in the appreciation of the clients and the community's perspectives, including those on ownership and identity. And going on, teachers need to be aware of their own biases, and they need to consider their historiography. Teaching should imbue students with a sensitivity to the past and a sensibility to site's qualities. And so it goes on. These are suggestions that people might like to at least consider when they devise their program of teaching for their particular course. And then there was also, we put forward a proposition, which is that absolutely nobody can teach all of landscape history. I mean, it's too big a subject. So you might be able to teach one part of it. Somebody else in another country may be able to teach another part of it. But together, if you act together, you can teach all of it. So the question is how to coordinate with others. And so we came up with this fairly obvious idea that we should share information. Now, these days, it's easy with podcasts and saved lectures and that sort of thing. There's an enormous amount of material already available. So the issue is how to make it available. Sounds like an easy thing to do, but I can assure you it won't be. So recently we held a workshop, which I'm glad to say Elizabeth here agreed to chair it. And we talked about how to share material. We came up with the idea that really we need a team of people to work out the practicalities of how to get this going. They need to consider the technology, copyright issues, how to assemble an inventory of material, a coded inventory. So if you want to know about, I don't know, underwater cultural landscapes in Bolivia, as we've just heard, you would find it on the inventory, or something else completely different from another part of the world. Yeah, it's all be there, ready to be searched. So that's the idea. The idea being that it will be available to everyone. Now, Elizabeth made a point that we probably need to have a more formal structure, because there may be grants to be had so that people can work on the subject properly. So that's yet to be decided. But we did get some volunteers, didn't we, Elizabeth, even then at the workshop. So at the present stage, we're looking for volunteers who are needed to, in the short term, set up the system. And then in the longer term, there will be people needed to monitor and to coordinate the material as it comes along. So we're looking really for a worldwide effort, worldwide collaboration between people in our field, really for the benefit not just of the teachers, but for the students. Because if you find a student has a particular interest, you would go into the system and you would say, look, this looks interesting for you, or that looks interesting for you. And to another student, you say, what about that? And that looks interesting. And that, you see, so in other words, the teacher becomes the conduit for introducing the student to material that's relevant to the student. So I think probably that's all I need to say, except to say if anybody has any questions, I'd be delighted to answer them.
I have actually something to add that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet.
okay.
Since our last symposium meeting. And that is that it's on the agenda. So I will bring this idea to the Scientific Council to have ECOMOS support it as a piece of work that the ISCCL would be involved with.
Right, yeah.
That gives us the support of ECOMOS. And it is going to, this was my contention, it's going to take grants, it's going to take an entity outside of the ISCCL to actually put this into a working, long-term, sustainable effort. And so with ECOMOS in partnership and the ISCCL in partnership, we can go forward and put together a group of faculty from around the world, some of which would be a part of ECOMOS, ISCCL, others which might be interested faculty, as David has suggested, and begin to put this broad effort together. It will take a number of years. I'm certain it will take a number of years to really materialize. But I think it's such a great effort, and I really applaud Jan and David for moving forward with this since 2022, with the first symposium, with the book, which you should absolutely get a copy of. And then following up to see how we can move forward in terms of teaching more effectively all of the different types of landscape history.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That's very encouraging to hear that you're going to commit ISCCL to this. That is a great step forward, I'm sure, in terms of organisation and in terms of any fundraising that's needed. So that's terrific. And we did identify a couple of volunteers. One from Australia, one from Romania.
Yeah.
Both very keen on the subject, but we need others to come forward to say, yes, they've got some time towards this. Not a huge amount of time, but some, over the next sort of couple of years, or maybe more. And it will all depend on the quality of work by those volunteers to get the system set up. So if anybody here is interested, or anybody listening in on this is interested, contact myself or to Elizabeth, and we will grab you, no doubt. So, Patricia.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting. Are you speaking about pedagogy or publications? What's the emphasis?
Well, it's the teaching, it's the pedagogy. The question is how to get the information through, the relevant information through to the students. And I've been aware during my teaching of the English landscape garden that more and more students are dropping off, sleeping, which is frustrating for me, and I'm sure for them. So I think we probably need a rather, instead of assuming that all students want the same material, is to perhaps have a more of a tutorial system, so that you don't have so many formal lectures. You have seminars whereby you discuss with the students what they're interested in, because they might want to pick up a particular subject, and then you can introduce them or point them in the right direction so that they can obtain the material and enlighten themselves. It's all really about getting the students to push forward instead of being whipped from behind, by an examination system, to get the students to go forward by themselves.